Um, so I'm going to fire it up here. So the first thing, I'm going to fire up the GUI. The first thing you're going to see is um, you're going to see some progress bars before you even get to any user interaction. And those progress bars, what the application is doing is parsing the a couple XML files. There's going to be two progress bars. The first file that it opens is and parses is the um, uh, an XML file from the NESCART database website, and I'll put a link to that. The NESCART database website, if you're not familiar with it and you're Nintendo person, you really need to go there if you have not been there, because it's amazing. It's essentially detailed information on pretty much, I mean, as far as I can tell, every single Nintendo game ever made. It's really, really impressive, and I cannot fathom how many countless hours the creator of that website put into that. It's unbelievable the amount of information that's on there. And you can just that XML file is freely available on their website. I don't think that it's like completely. I don't think that it's the latest. I think the actual website database has, the SQL database. I imagine it's SQL that the person is using. Is much larger than what I have in the XML file. But the XML file is essentially just a digest of the most important bits of information on the website converted to XML syntax, and it makes parsing it really, really easy. Qt doesn't have a built-in Qt file parsing library. It can parse like the XML attributes and elements within an XML file, but you need to feed it the file itself, and you need to also provide your own search algorithm. I just implemented a simple little, like, I think it's like, it's a depth first recursive search algorithm. So it just goes in and parses out all the elements and attributes and feeds them to the Qt XML parser library, and that creates a tree of data that I can search with later on, and I'll show you what I use that for. So the second XML file that parses it, the second XML file is a lot smaller, and the progress bar, you might not actually get to see it. It goes so fast. You might be able to pause the video and see it, but that XML file is from a different site. It's actually it was provided to me by MK Productions, which are the same creators as the people who created the UberNES emulator. That's UBER NES emulator. And that XML file contains the box text, or the text from the back of the box, the text or story from the back of the game box for many, I think it's like 100 or so of the most popular Nintendo games, and it's really, really cool to. I can't imagine how long that took either, just transcribe all that information, but it's really cool, and I got that from one of the creators of the Uber NES. So. And they're willing to provide that to anybody who wants it. The original file that I got was actually in this pseudo CSV, like comma separated values format when I got it, but that wasn't very useful to me, so I converted it to XML for much easier parsing. So I converted it to XML not by hand. I found this free app on SourceForge. I think it's just literally called CVS to XML, with 2 being the number 2, if you're interested in that. So the XML file isn't immediately available, or the CSV file for that matter isn't immediately available from the Uber NES website, but again, like I said, they're willing to provide that to you, and if I get permission from them, I've asked permission to release the XML file that I created. So if I get permission from that, I'm more than happy to provide that myself, and I've also provided it back to them so they can give it to anybody who wants it. So let's go ahead and fire up the GUI. So there's the progress bars, and I actually did see the second progress bar, so you can pause the video if you really want to see it for whatever reason. This is the first window that pops up before you actually get to the main GUI. My emulator actually has a working Ethernet interface. It's not fleshed out yet, but I can send UDP packets over Ethernet back and forth between the GUI front end and the emulator, and that all works. Right now, at the present moment in time, the main communications interface is via UART, and that works really well. It's really high. It has a lot of functionality to it. The way that I've designed it, so it obviously is much slower than Ethernet will be, but eventually I'm going to flesh out the Ethernet UDP interface, and that is how all the main primary communication, uploading ROMs, querying the emulator, etc., will work. But I'll always leave the UART as an option to the user to interface to the emulator if they want. Really, I'm looking forward to the speed, because it takes a little while to load up the ROMs over the UART. I mean, some of the bigger ROMs, and you'll get a feel for that, how long they take. But obviously 100 megabit per second is going to be a lot faster than 115, 200 baud. So that'll be nice to have that. But I'm not going to work on that for quite a while. I have some other stuff that I want to do that I'll talk about later before I even get to that. So, but anyways, this window that first pops up is asking you what IP and port you want to use on the emulator itself, and then on the computer that's running this GUI application. So I'm going to click OK here. And now this is the main. I'm going to shrink this down just so it's. Okay, so this is the main GUI interface. Just go over some of the basic stuff here. So on the left side is the UART communication settings. Like I said, 115, 200 baud running here, and you're able to load and verify transfer of ROMs over the UART. The Ethernet interface, this is nothing. I mean, it doesn't do anything right now. It just allows you to connect to one adapter, but eventually, like I said, when I flesh out the Ethernet interface, you'll be able to select the adapter and, I don't know, maybe change the IP and port on the fly. I don't know. I've got so many ideas for this emulator and for the GUI. It just, I don't even know what to start on first, and I'll probably never get them all done. So on the right side, this is a text box, and this will print out anything that it receives over the UART. So any responses to commands that you send over the UART, they'll all show up here. Any errors will all show up here. The Ethernet interface will eventually do the same thing, but right now it'll still display text, and I have a little test widget that I'll show you later that'll put some information in here. There's nothing in the file menu at all. Let's just exit. Help. There's an about. I forget what this even says, but there it is. Tools. Right now, it's just program the FPGA, and that's what I ran before, which will pop up the that information pane and the external process standard out window that I showed you down here earlier, and I want to be very careful that I don't click that, because doing that is what crashed my last video. What crashed Camtasia, so I'm not going to do that again. The view, this has some information in it. So what I want to show you here is remember I was telling you about the two progress bars that parse the XML file. So what I do as it's parsing them, it creates this QTree widget object, and it allows you to look through the entire parsed XML file. This is the XML tree from the NESCART database website. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands, I don't know, of games in here. And this I really don't think that this is all of the games, because if you look on the website, I mean, there's so many. But I actually haven't found a game yet that hasn't been in this XML tree. So, but this is just to show you what essentially it does. It parses out everything in the XML file and it shows you all this information. So you can look at it if you want. It really doesn't. This window doesn't really serve any purpose except to show you what it's generated and what was actually contained in the XML file. So, but this is pretty much it. And I'll show you what this information is used for in just a minute, because you're probably like, well, okay, and so I'll show you that in just a second. So that's the NES card database XML tree, and then the VeriNES box text XML tree. This is just CRCs with the related box text for each game. So again, this is really just to serve as, you know, you can look at it and you can verify that it actually did parse the file. So but it's still useful just to see that stuff. Obviously the NES card database XML tree has way more information in it. If you're curious about a game or which mapper it uses, and you know how big it is, etc., etc. So a lot of really cool information on there, and this is a far cry. This isn't even remotely the amount of information that's actually available on the NES card database website. So again, I would recommend you check out that site. One of the big things that I added since my last video is this ROM information window. Essentially what this is each time you load a ROM, it'll show you the details of the ROM, and this is where that information from the NES card database XML file comes in. It'll search through the database it'll search through that Q tree widget, and it'll display the information for that ROM in this pane here. And then it'll also, one of the neat things I added was the ability to download the image files from the NES card database site, because the NES card database also has images for the front and back of the cartridge, front and back of the PCB, the front and back of the box, and the manual. And that's not for all games, but there's quite a few games that have all of these images. So and then you can also display the box text for the game. So I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and load up a ROM here. So I don't know if it just came through on the webcam. I don't know if Camtasia captured it. I think it depends on how many keyframes it's set up for, or how often it takes a keyframe. But anyways, what it did was the screen just went blank for a second, and the reason it did that was because each time I load a ROM, or you click the load button, it'll reset the entire Nintendo so that it always starts from a known state. Okay, so that each game, when you load it, it'll always start from a known state in the emulator, and the emulator isn't, it doesn't have leftovers or leftover data, or some kind of maintained state going on from the previous game that was loaded, because that can cause crashes and stuff. So